Hi, I'm Professor Green. This is Chapter 9, Part 3. So, right, I'm doing all three sections in one sitting. That's unique for me. Sometimes, very often I get interrupted. But here we are. Let's go ahead and start with the learning objectives, navigating the political landscape. So, we're going to list the methods for navigating political landscape in organizations, recognizing political actions. Oh, I don't think I'm sharing my screen. Hold on. Let me go ahead and did I do that yet? Nope. Let me start again. Share screen. Here we go. And so we're going to recognize organizational politics, understanding what they are, that they can be a good thing, because they often have negative connotations, describing what makes organizational climates more or less political, right? And so why we have more politics in one organization versus less, and how there can be good politics and not so good politics, greasing the wheels of government, as they said originally in the New York Times, but not just government, right? Private organizations as well and nonprofits. And know how to operate effectively in political climates because it's going to exist in your organization no matter what. What are organizational politics? Efforts by the organizational members to seek resources and achieve desired goals through formal and informal systems and structures. How people gain and use power in decision making and how they get ahead. I'm glad they put it in black and white, right? That we use politics sometimes to get ahead, right? As we said, we rely a lot on what we know, but a lot of things are about, who we know as well. So, as we said, that was just one part of the politics. And so, why do we have organizational politics? It's not in the slides, but I wanted to say is because there's limited capacity of the formal systems to meet the performance needs of the organization, right? So we can't be in meetings all day long with our colleagues and with our bosses talking about how things should be happening, right? We get, here at LMU, we get like 2 meetings a semester for like 3 or 4 hours at a time, and we get an overview. Then for the rest of the semester, we're encouraged to network, to talk to each other individually, etc. And so there just isn't enough time because people have to go off and do the work. So these informal processes are ways for us to keep the organization moving forward. And so why do we have these organizational politics? As I said, that we have formal systems and informal systems. And then we also have self-interested politics, but we're not going to talk about those so much because those are not cool. But formal systems are how processes are coordinated in structures. Those are the 2 or 3 meetings that we have for 3 or 4 hours a week, 3 or 4 hours a semester. The informal systems are patterns of personal relationship and activity generated through everyday interactions, right? And so I love these, I love running into my colleagues, talking about what they think of an initiative, how we can work together, etc. It's just a really exciting piece, I think, of going to the office every day. And self-interested politics when people work to shift outcomes to their personal advantage, right? So I hope I don't ever work in this realm, but I'm hopefully looking to use politics to move the organization forward. But this can happen, so we need to be aware of it, and we can understand why sometimes politics gets a bad rap. So self-interest politics, just to talk about that for a minute, right, is all about coalition building, favoritism, scapegoating, backstabbing, using information as a political tool, right? So this is not what we want to do. We want to use it for the betterment of the organization. And so what do we mean when we say political environment? It's the extent to which people in organizations work within and around formal policies and procedures to get things done, right? Because we want to work within the system, but sometimes it's effective to work around the system or in conjunction with the system is how I want to frame it. When they say workarounds, right? Exploiting loopholes, seeking assistance from influential people. I think that's legit sometimes, right? If you want to get something done, find out who the person is who makes the decisions. Or you're using one's connections to access restricted influence to information to influence decisions, right? that is on the border of positive versus negative. So again, workarounds can either be positive or negative for organizations and those working within them. We want to encourage more joint problem solving, right? Not talking about people behind their back. So the perception of politics, right? This is what I think is interesting, that two people may experience the same climate very differently depending on the amount of status and power that they hold, right? Here in the classroom, right, the professors might all say, well, our class is going great. But meanwhile, the students are like, oh, we don't really like that class all that much, right? So someone with a lot of power or in the know will likely see the climate as positive and beneficial. But someone with less power feels powerless, will experience the climate as dysfunctional and demoralizing. And so again, that's come back to my passion about making sure that employees have as much information as possible. That's what I did my second master's on, because I felt like on organizational communication, because when people feel that they have information, that they're in the know, they feel more powerful, they feel um, like they're enjoying their place of work, right? So how I've also found that to do this is to, when I feel like I'm falling a little bit out of the loop, then I make an effort to socialize a little bit more at work, going to events, connecting with colleagues that I haven't seen in a long time, setting up coffee dates, etc. Then I feel like I'm understanding a little bit more about what's happening in the workplace. So how do I navigate organizational politics? It's an important part of career management, for better or for worse, right? It involves understanding how to establish power bases, develop political skills, and build strong and supportive networks. One of the other things I do is I follow other professors on Instagram. So I love seeing, what Jason DeMello is doing every day. He's single and he does a lot of stuff at LMU and outside of LMU, and he does stories every day. It's just awesome. I also follow Ellen Eschner, and she does also things inside and outside of the university. Dr. Choi, David Choi, and he travels a lot. So it really has changed the way I engage with the university. So reading the situation, framing the message, and knowing how influence tactics are used. So we're going to go through a bunch of different slides that go into detail with this. So the first thing is political skills. Those who are able to recognize politics are adept at reading between the lines and seeing what lies beneath the veil. And, I had a colleague who worked in IT, and he didn't attend a lot of these social events, or we call them all hands meetings, this twice a semester, all school meetings. I don't know, he was wearing a mask. I don't know if he's about the germs. I knew it was about the germs. He told me that. And I really encouraged him to go because I could see that he was falling out of the loop with things. And he even came to me and said, my boss is asking me some questions about my work. And I was like, I know, because, a lot of these things get done at these social events. And now he seems to be in better graces. So being politically savvy, skill and cleverness at reading political environments and understanding how to effectively shape the situation. Political skill, understanding and influence others to act in ways that enhance personal and organizational objectives. And as an example, when I first started as a full-time employee here at LMU, I'd already been working part-time. I felt like I started to ask the associate dean for different things like travel, expenses to go to conferences, etc., which I thought were in line with the school goals. But then I learned that there's not a lot of travel support for faculty. And so I kind of got my hand slapped is how I felt, and if I had known, if I'd been more politically savvy, I wouldn't have asked in the first place. So learn to read the situation, right? Or I would have, asked for less and funded the situation differently. So being socially astute. And again, this emotional intelligence comes back, being able to read your emotions and the emotions of other people in the room, staying appraised of relevant developments, watching for the motives behind people's behaviors, getting to know people, what drives them, what encourages them, the desired intent behind an action. They can also be misinterpreted so it's important to verify that information and their intent, right? I have a colleague, he works a lot, James Plechnik. He's the in the accounting department. And I think he's just truly motivated because he comes from a family of academics. He has like 8 brothers and sisters. They all are in academia. And he just loves, research. He loves managing a master's program. He loves being the best professor in the accounting department. And I think that's awesome. But I wouldn't have known that had I not spent 3 hours in the car with him driving back from a conference in San Diego last summer. So know how to frame the message, right? And again, had I known more about how to frame the message last year when I wanted to go to Amsterdam for a conference, it would have been totally different. I would have said, I will pay for half of my trip, or I will do this trip in a different way. Yeah, but I didn't know at the time. So framing helps individuals to gain interpersonal influence, the ability to exert a powerful influence on others in a subtle and convincing manner. And I think we can all really relate to this one for sure, right? If we frame it correctly or not, and aligning it with the corporate strategy is a really, good way to do that. We have 3 more slides to this chapter. Influence tactics. But influencing can be a challenge, as we spoke about in previous chapters. Changing another's beliefs, attitudes, values. The tactics range in utility, nature, and impact, as we spoke about. Responses to influence can be outright defiant or resistant, and people can acquiesce or comply. So you have to be kind of, careful with how you do that. And what are the responses if you try to influence some people? There can be resistance, as we spoke about in this chapter, refusing outright, ignoring, asking higher authorities to overrule the request. I've done that myself, saying, you know what, I'm going to talk to your boss about this, especially when they don't work directly for me, right? If they're not doing the work, then after you ask them 3 times, then you have the responsibility as a project manager to go to their boss and ask kind of what the priorities are on their plate and potentially why they're not getting back to you. Compliance, right? Doing it if they have to, but they don't necessarily agree with this, right? This is one way to do it, but don't try and do this many times. And then commitment, as we spoke about in this chapter, right? Because they feel committed to the organization, or because they agree with it and they actually do own it and run with it. So, yeah. And here are some lists of influence tactics. So, how can you get people to do things for you? The first 5 are considered softer and not as coercive as the last 4. So rational persuasion, right? As we spoke about in this course, right? Actually giving them some logical, arguments as to why you think they should do it. Inspirational appeal, Martin Luther King, right? Giving them inspiration. This is a great project. This will be good for your career. This will be a great initiative for the university. Consulting with them, getting them their buy-in, integration, ingradation, right? Right, getting to ingrate it in their personal ideas, and getting them to, again, buy into the idea. And then personal appeals, doing it because you feel like you want them to do it. Can you do this for me? In exchange, okay, if you do this for me, I'll do something else for you. Sometimes that's okay, right? It depends on the situation. Coalition tactics, getting someone else to jump in and say, hey, we're all doing this together. Legitimate pressure, right? I need you to do this by a certain period of time. Your boss is telling me that you have to do this. And legitimating tactics. So again, not the simplest, but, saying, this is legitimate. We have to do this. Sorry, it's again, you need to get done. So hopefully that is helpful as we finish up chapter 9. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in chapter 10.